Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. If you love powerful stories about revenge, resilience, and unexpected twists, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that keeps you on the edge of your seat. Now, let's dive into today's story. The first time Rachel Morgan met the Caldwell family, she brought homemade cookies. They were snickerdoodles, warm, a little underbaked in the center the way Ben liked them. His mother, Darlene, took one, examined it as though it were an artifact, and said, "Well, aren't these humble?" That moment should have told Rachel everything she needed to know. Ben, her then boyfriend, squeezed her hand under the table and whispered, "She means well." But as Rachel would learn in the years that followed, Darlene always meant well. When she asked if Rachel had any help cleaning that little apartment, or if she found a dress off the rack that fit nicely, it was just her way of being helpful. Rachel didn't come from money. She didn't even come from middle-class comfort. She grew up in a modest two-bedroom home in Indiana, raised by a single father who worked 2 jobs and believed college was a luxury. Rachel believed otherwise. She worked her way through school, waited tables, took on night shifts, skipped vacations, and kept her dreams silent but steady. Meeting Ben in grad school felt like a cosmic gift. He was introverted, brilliant, and adored her determination. But Rachel hadn't realized that marrying Ben meant marrying into a world that had already decided she didn't belong. Every summer, the Caldwell clan would retreat to a luxury resort in Colorado, a secluded spot tucked between pine forests and crystal-clear lakes. To Rachel, it looked like a page out of a lifestyle magazine. Chandeliers hung from lodge ceilings. Fireplaces gave off the faint scent of pine and wealth. The women wore Loro Piana and sipped wine while swapping stories of second homes. The men discussed trust funds and corporate boards like weather. Rachel? She brought the salad. She cleared the plates. And every year, someone, Darlene, Ben's cousin Haley, or his sister Jenna, would mistake her for resort staff. Once, someone actually handed her a tip. Ben laughed it off. "They're just old-fashioned." But Rachel didn't laugh. She smiled. She always smiled. Until the summer she stopped. That summer had started like all the others. They arrived at the resort with their matching Caldwell luggage, wearing coordinating family polos for the traditional arrival photo. Rachel trailed behind, her plain blue suitcase the only one without a monogram. She knew the drill. She would unpack, make sure Ben's things were arranged just right, then head to the welcome dinner. There, she'd sit beside Darlene, who would remind her not to serve herself too much wine. "Sweetie, you get chatty." Rachel hated that dinner, not because she wasn't welcome, but because she wasn't seen. But this year was different. Rachel had changed the menu. Literally. 6 months before, the resort had come up for sale. She'd seen it by accident, an off-market whisper to a hotel investment group. And she, who had quietly invested in small properties for years under the radar, made a call. Then another. Then she cashed out nearly all of her liquidity and made a bid. She used a holding company, a false name. Nobody could trace it to her, not even Ben. He thought she was still consulting for a travel tech startup. He never asked why she spent so many late nights on Zoom, why she flew out so often, why she suddenly knew the names of hotel architects and hospitality fund managers. He never asked, and Rachel had stopped explaining, because Rachel was building something, not just wealth, but control. She had approved the renovation of the wine cellar. She had declined the Caldwell family's legacy discount. She had insisted that all guests use the new online system. No special arrangements. Ben's mother hadn't taken it well. "What do you mean we're in the back lodge this year? That's unacceptable." Rachel smiled to herself when she read the message from the reservation desk. "I'm sure it was just a glitch," she'd said aloud. "These systems aren't perfect, but they were." She had made sure of it. At the welcome dinner, she wore a simple navy sundress. No designer laves. No effort to stand out. But for the first time, she wasn't trying to blend in either. The dining room buzzed with chatter. The Caldwell men laughed about Tesla stocks. The women passed plates without ever making eye contact with her. Ben was there, smiling as always, oblivious as ever. He hadn't noticed the new chef, the revised wine list, the absent complimentary champagne the Caldwells always expected. Then Jenna looked at Rachel and said, Would you mind grabbing a few extra napkins? You're already heading toward the kitchen, right? Rachel looked at her. For a heartbeat, she considered saying no, but then she nodded. Sure. She walked to the kitchen slowly, deliberately, every step echoing in the polished wood hallway. Tomorrow night, the general manager would stand in front of the entire Caldwell family and announce that the resort had a new majority owner. When they asked who, he would simply point to her. Rachel could already see Darlene's face. She imagined it over and over like a silent movie reel: shock, confusion, denial, and then silence. For the first time in her life, Rachel Morgan would not be ignored, not laughed at, not handed a napkin request. She would be seen, but not because she demanded it, because she earned it. Rachel didn't grow up around spreadsheets or stocks. She grew up folding laundry beside her dad's recliner, watching him nod off between shifts and counting the last few dollars in a jar to pay for school field trips. Ambition wasn't a luxury. It was the only way out. She never wanted to be rich. She just wanted to be safe. When Ben asked her to marry him, she thought she'd finally arrived at that safety. He was a tenured professor, respected and quiet, and he loved her in his own reserved way. But Rachel learned quickly that marrying Ben meant stepping into a world that smiled politely while dissecting you with questions like, "Where did you say you went to college again? Are your parents around? You must be so proud of Ben's accomplishments." At first, Rachel tried. She brought wine to family events, complimented Darlene's outfits, hosted Christmas dinners, planned Ben's father's retirement party. She made custom invitations, booked the caterers, even handled the last-minute mishap with the cake. And still, at the party, Ben's sister stood up and thanked everyone, siblings, spouses, caterers by name. Except Rachel. Ben leaned over and whispered, "You know you did most of it." But that was all. Just a whisper. No acknowledgement. No correction. No defense. That night, Rachel cried in the shower with the water turned up so Ben wouldn't hear. Something cracked open inside her that evening. Something small but powerful. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She simply refocused. If they wouldn't see her for who she was, then she'd become someone they couldn't ignore. She started small. It began with YouTube videos late at night. How to invest, how to build equity, how to read a P&L sheet. She devoured books, took online finance courses. While others posted vacation selfies, Rachel watched webinars on hotel acquisitions. She joined a few closed forums under a pseudonym, where old men underestimated her, and she let them, asking sharp questions hidden beneath soft phrasing. Then came her first investment, a rundown 4-room lodge in Montana. She bought it anonymously, cleaned rooms when no one else would, and quietly flipped it over 2 years for double its value. She used the profits to buy a share in a boutique motel outside Santa Fe, then a larger property in Oregon. She created a holding company, Clear Pines Hospitality Group. The name sounded old, established, like something that had always existed. Every dollar she earned, she reinvested. She didn't buy new clothes, didn't upgrade her car. She used coupons, packed lunches, and wore the same winter coat for 7 years. They laughed about it. "Rachel must really love that Subaru," Darlene had said once. "She's just simple," Jenna added with a smile that wasn't. They thought she was cheap. But Rachel wasn't being cheap. She was arming herself. By the time the resort came up for sale, Rachel had already positioned herself to strike. The call came through an industry contact she'd met at a retreat in Vermont. A family-run luxury lodge in Colorado was looking to sell quietly. Too many internal disputes, too much upkeep. It was the same resort the Caldwells visited every year. Rachel didn't hesitate. She emptied her accounts, sold stock, moved money across 5 shells. She didn't sleep for 3 days. But when the ink dried on the papers, Clear Pines Hospitality Group held 78% controlling interest of the resort. And Rachel Morgan held 100% of Clear Pines. She didn't tell Ben, not because she was hiding it, but because, in 10 years of marriage, Ben had never really asked. He assumed she was consulting. He never noticed her late-night calls, the balance sheets spread across the dining table, or the way she spoke more fluently in asset terms than ever before. He was a good man, but he never saw her. 3 weeks before the family's annual summer trip, Rachel requested a few policy updates to the resort's guest protocol. She removed the legacy discount program, required new ID verification for all family bookings, reassigned all preferred room blocks. She rewrote the wine list, declined a champagne order, requested that no guest receive complimentary upgrades unless authorized directly by Clear Pines. Darlene was furious. "This is an outrage," she emailed the front desk. "We've been coming for years. Do you know who we are?" The staff was polite. "Yes, ma'am, but we've recently undergone a management change." Rachel read every email, every complaint, every demand, and approved nothing. She smiled, not out of spite, but out of clarity. For years, she had tried to earn their respect. She gave them her time, her attention, her kindness, and they met her with backhanded compliments and cold shoulders. So now, she gave them boundaries. The night before the welcome dinner, Rachel stood by the window of their suite, watching the lake shimmer under the moonlight. The same lake she used to watch from the lesser lodge. Now, she had the best view on the property, not because someone gave it to her, but because she bought the mountain it sat on. Ben came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You okay?" he asked. "You've been quiet." Rachel leaned into him. "Just tired. Long day." He kissed her temple and went to shower. He didn't ask what made her tired, or why her phone buzzed constantly, or why she hadn't touched her wine. Rachel stood there, heart calm, vision sharp. Tomorrow night, at the resort's annual ownership summit, they would announce her name. And the woman who once handed out napkins and was asked to clear the plates like a deer would finally be known, not as someone's wife or someone's help, but as someone who owned it all. The sun was already beginning to dip behind the mountains when the Caldwell family arrived at the resort. Darlene, as always, descended from her luxury SUV in pearls and patent leather flats, fanning herself with a brochure she never read. Ben's sister Jenna followed behind, phone in hand, filming an Instagram story titled, "Back at Our Summer Sanctuary." Rachel watched from the lodge balcony, hidden behind the shade of the tall stone pillars. She wore no makeup, no designer labels, just a soft beige sweater and jeans. And yet she felt taller than ever. From this very spot last year, she had stood behind Arlene, carrying a cooler full of prepped snacks because that poor kitchen can never get the temperature right, darling. She'd spent most of that trip clearing up after everyone and listening to jokes about marrying up. But not this year. This year, she had nothing in her hands, and everything under her name. At check-in, the changes were subtle, but surgical. The Caldwell family's usual lodge, the Cascade, was no longer reserved. Instead, they were directed to the Timber Annex, equally luxurious on paper, but lacking the panoramic lake view Darlene considered her birthright. "We always stay in Cascade," she snapped at the young receptionist, who responded with polished grace. "Understand, ma'am, but Cascade is under renovation and we've placed your party in our next best suite." The Timber Annex was approved by Clear Pines Hospitality Group directly. Rachel had signed that email herself. It had been her first decision after acquiring the resort. Jenna rolled her eyes and muttered, "What's Clear Pines anyway? Never heard of them." "You will," Rachel whispered under her breath from the balcony. She turned back into the suite and took one last look around. The master suite, now hers, was styled with oak paneling and local artwork she personally commissioned. The coffee table bore a tray of delicate, locally sourced teas. No imported brand names, no extravagance. Just authenticity. Her authenticity. That night, Rachel stood alone in the hallway just before the welcome dinner began. She watched as the family filtered into the dining hall. Ben walking beside his brother, laughing. Jenna snapping selfies in front of the fireplace. Darlene in emerald satin, instructing a server to move her wine glass a little to the left. Rachel waited until almost everyone was seated before slipping in quietly, unnoticed as always. She didn't mind. Not this time. She sat at the far end of the long wooden table. No one greeted her. Not even Ben, who was deep in conversation with his cousin about stock splits. When the appetizers arrived, no one offered her the platter. When Jenna asked aloud, "Did someone forget to bring extra napkins?" everyone turned to Rachel instinctively. "She's already up," Can you grab some, hon? Darlene asked with a smile, so sweet it could rot wood. Rachel stood, slowly. She didn't argue. She didn't smile either. She simply walked to the kitchen. In the kitchen, she found Thomas, the general manager, and handed him a folded note. It's time, she said quietly. Thomas raised his eyebrows. Are you sure? Rachel took a deep breath. They need to know. He nodded. I'll make the announcement after dessert, like we planned. Back in the dining room, the conversation had turned to Tesla models and second home upgrades. Someone had just mentioned how handy it would be to have a family discount for next summer, and Darlene chimed in about how this place always takes care of us. I'm sure we'll have the same arrangement. Rachel sat silently. Her hands were steady, until the waiter placed dessert on the table. Thomas stepped forward. Excuse me, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the welcome dinner. As part of tonight's special gathering, we have a very important announcement. The room hushed. As of last quarter, this resort officially welcomes a new majority owner under Clear Pines Hospitality Group. The property was acquired in full, and all operations now fall under the leadership of that group's principal. A few murmurs started. Someone whispered, "What does that even mean?" Thomas smiled. And in case you're wondering who that person is, he turned and pointed slowly, directly to the end of the table. To Rachel. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. Darlene stared at her, wide-eyed, frozen. Jenna's phone slipped slightly in her grip, still recording. Ben blinked, confused. What's going on? Rachel stood. She didn't gloat. She didn't bow. She simply looked at them all, her voice calm, almost tender. I'm the owner now, she said. That's why the reservation changed. That's why the menu's different. That's why there are no legacy discounts anymore. Still, no one spoke. Darlene was the first to recover. This is some sort of joke, right? Rachel's eyes didn't flinch. No, I bought this resort last year. Quietly, anonymously. And I've made a few changes, starting with no longer offering special treatment to people who don't treat others well. Jenna scoffed, but Ben's face was what held Rachel's gaze. Shock? Not rage. Not disappointment. Just stunned confusion. Rachel, why didn't you tell me? He asked. She met his eyes. Would you have listened? Ben's lips parted, but no words came out. After dinner, Rachel left early. She walked alone along the stone path behind the main lodge, the lake glowing beneath the stars. From a distance, she could still hear the family chattering, voices rising at the fire pit where they roasted marshmallows and opened more wine. She didn't go back. Instead, she climbed to the wooden deck of her private suite and stared out across the lake. Everything shimmered in the night. The water, the sky, her reflection in the glass. And still, she felt it, that old ache, the one that wondered if all this was enough, if being seen finally replaced being loved. But she knew something now. Being loved by people who never tried to understand her wasn't worth sacrificing her identity. She whispered to herself, this hill was theirs. Now it's mine, and they'll never make me small again. Ben sat on the edge of the fire pit bench, a stick of half-melted marshmallow in his hand, but he hadn't moved in 5 minutes. The same question swirled in his mind over and over. How did I not know? The firelight danced across his glasses. Behind him, the rest of the family had splintered into confused clumps, some whispering, some texting furiously, some still trying to Google Clear Pines Hospitality Group. Darlene had stormed off 10 minutes ago, mumbling about how some things are simply impossible, and surely the resort board will hear about this. Jenna was pacing, phone to her ear, telling someone, I don't even know who she really is anymore. Ben looked down at the half-eaten dessert on the plate beside him. Rachel's favorite, vanilla bean cheesecake with a raspberry swirl. No one touched it, not even her, because she was gone. She had quietly disappeared from the table after making her announcement. No fireworks, no mic drop. Just the truth delivered plainly. I bought this place. I own it now. And I've made a few changes, starting with not tolerating disrespect. Ben thought he knew Rachel. They met in grad school. She was the calm in his storm. The one who always smiled when his family said something subtly demeaning. Who always deflected with grace. Who never complained. And yet now, all those quiet moments flooded back with a new meaning. The late nights, the odd books on hospitality finance, the time she asked him questions about real estate tax law, just out of curiosity. The business trips, she said, were consulting gigs. She'd been building an empire right under his nose, and he'd never once asked her where the foundation came from. In her private suite at the top of the hill, Rachel stared at her reflection in the floor-length mirror. She hadn't changed clothes. She didn't even take off her shoes. Her chest rose and fell steadily, but she could feel the vibration of adrenaline just under the surface. Not excitement, not pride, relief. She had done it. She'd stood before the people who had once labeled her just the wife, the girl from nowhere, the maid of the family dinners, and told them, without raising her voice, that she now owned the very ground beneath their feet. But now what? A knock echoed at the door. Rachel froze. Another knock. Then a voice. "It's me, Ben." Rachel opened the door slowly. He stood there, slightly hunched like a student waiting for a teacher's verdict. "I didn't want to come up earlier," he said. "Didn't know if you'd want to see me." She stepped aside. "Come in." The room was quiet, except for the low hum of the fireplace. Ben walked in and sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. He didn't speak right away. Neither did she. Finally, he looked up. "I feel like I've been asleep for 5 years." Rachel's lips curled slightly. "I know the feeling." He took a breath. "I'm not mad. I'm embarrassed. That you didn't know. That I didn't try to know." Rachel nodded slowly. "I gave you clues, Ben. I gave everyone clues. You all just assumed I was harmless. Invisible." Ben Veen said. "That's not true." Rachel tilted her head. "Isn't it? How many times did you laugh when someone called me the simple one? Or let your mom hand me a to-do list at Christmas like I was staff? Did you ever once say she built her own career or she doesn't deserve to be treated like that?" Ben looked down. "No, exactly." He rubbed his hands together, searching for words. "I didn't mean to make you feel small." "You didn't make me feel small," Rachel replied, voice calm. "You just stood by while others did. And that was worse." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Ben asked, "Why this place? Of all places?" Rachel turned to the window. The lake shimmered again beneath the moonlight, just like last year. Just like every year. "Because it's where I disappeared the most," she whispered. "And I wanted to reclaim it." Ben nodded slowly. "So what happens now?" Rachel turned back to him. "I don't know." He looked at her, eyes soft. "Do you still want to be married to me?" Rachel didn't answer right away. Then, gently, she said, "I want to be with someone who sees me, who values me for more than what I quietly endure. And right now, I don't know if that's you." Ben's shoulders slumped. He nodded, not fighting it. "Okay." Down in the dining lodge, the whispers continued. Darlene had returned, drink in hand, fuming quietly. "I don't care what paper she has. You don't just walk in and own a legacy like this. We made this place a Caldwell tradition. She can't just erase us." But she already had. Rachel hadn't changed the name on the resort. She didn't need to. She had changed its soul. No more entitlements. No more inherited privilege passed down through fake smiles and manipulation. Only earned respect, equal footing, clear boundaries. The kind Rachel had spent a lifetime learning to build. The next morning, the family received a letter slipped under each of their doors. Simple, black and white, embossed with the Clear Pines logo. "To the Caldwell family. As a courtesy, your current stay will be fully covered. However, beginning next year, all reservations will follow standard rates and availability. We look forward to welcoming you back as guests. Sincerely, Rachel Morgan, Principal Owner, Clear Pines Hospitality Group." 3 months had passed since that unforgettable dinner at the resort. Autumn crept into the trees of Colorado, painting the hills in gold and rust. The lake reflected a quieter sky now. No calvelboices. No curated family photos in matching outfits. And in the main lodge office, Rachel sat at the head of a long oak table, signing contracts for a new wing. A wellness retreat. Sustainable design. Local staff. Fair pay. Her vision. No legacy discounts. No inherited names. Just merit. She had moved into the resort full-time shortly after the summer ended, overseeing operations, restructuring training programs, and building something she could finally call her own. Not borrowed, not shared, hers. She no longer needed Ben's approval. After their conversation that night, they agreed to separate. It wasn't dramatic, just honest. Rachel had outgrown the version of herself that had waited for validation. Ben moved to a quiet rental in Boulder and began therapy. He sent her a message once a week, never asking for more, just checking in. She never replied. Not yet. Then, one November morning, Rachel's phone rang. It was Jenna. Rachel let it go to voicemail. She expected the usual, some desperate appeal to reconsider, letting the family book the resort again for next summer. But something in Jenna's voice on the message made her pause. Rachel, I know you probably won't call back, but we need to talk. Something's happened. Please, call me. Rachel exhaled deeply. She hesitated, then pressed call back. The news came in like a slow landslide. The Caldwell family business, Caldwell Interiors, a once successful chain of luxury furniture showrooms, had collapsed. The housing market had shifted, sales dried up, and one of their silent partners had pulled funding at the worst possible time. Darlene was facing foreclosure on her estate in Connecticut. Jenna had sold her Tesla and moved back home, and Ben's brother had declared bankruptcy. They were, for the first time in generations, broke. Jenna's voice cracked on the phone. We don't know what to do. We might lose everything. Mom says she's too old to start over. And, God, Rachel, I know we don't deserve your help, but the only valuable thing we still have is that resort. The one you own. Silence. Rachel sat still, the phone warm in her hand. Are you asking me to give you money? She finally asked. Jenna hesitated. No. I mean, maybe, or a buyback deal, or just a loan. You're the only one who. Her voice broke. You're the only one who made it. Rachel looked out the window at the snow-dusted pine trees. The irony was bitter, but not satisfying. They had spent years looking down on her. Now, they looked up in desperation. She could say no. She should say no, but she didn't. Instead, she scheduled a meeting. 3 days later, the remaining Caldwell family flew to Colorado. Coach, not private. They arrived in the main lodge with suitcases worn at the edges and faces lined with fear. Darlene looked older than Rachel remembered. She no longer carried the chill of entitlement, only fatigue. Rachel welcomed them into the conference room. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply handed them a folder. Inside was a single-page agreement. The Clear Pines Restart Proposal. A one-time fund of $250,000 to assist in restructuring personal finances. A small but fair salary for part-time positions offered to any family member willing to work in the resort. Conditions: public apology, signed statements releasing any future claims over the property, and full acknowledgement of Rachel Morgan as sole founder and operator. Darlene looked up. You want us to work here? Rachel nodded. If you want help, it comes with humility. Jenna wiped tears from her eyes. What kind of work? Rachel leaned forward. Whatever is needed. Housekeeping. Event staffing. Laundry. The same work I did when you thought I was beneath you. Darlene flinched. Ben was quiet. He hadn't spoken a word since entering the room. Finally, he stood. I'll do it, he said softly. Jenna looked stunned. You're a tenured professor. Ben shook his head. I was a tenured professor. I resigned last month. I want to build something real now. He looked at Rachel. Not with pride, not with expectation, just clarity. Rachel didn't answer, but she passed him a pen. Weeks later, guests checked into the Clear Pines Resort for the winter season. They were greeted by Jenna, now working reception in a crisp gray uniform. Ben ran logistics and maintenance. Even Darlene, once too proud to lift a suitcase, was spotted folding towels in the laundry wing. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't revenge. It was reality. Rachel didn't make them suffer. She made them grow. One night, after the last guest had gone to bed, Rachel stood alone in the dining hall. It was quiet. The fire crackled. She poured herself a glass of red wine and walked onto the balcony overlooking the frozen lake. Ben joined her. He didn't say anything. She didn't either. But for the first time in years, Rachel felt something she hadn't dared to feel before. Peace. Not because they had changed, but because she had. And no one, no legacy, no name, no wound could take that away. The maid they once ignored now writes their paychecks and does it every day with grace.